But I did find weather to be fascinating. It is a level of some level of it is conjecture, but I always love the fact that there's a lot of myths. Like the idea that lightning never strikes twice. Well, it strikes like the Empire State Building like 100 times a year.
Wow.
But people don't ignore that fact, or the fact that you got the only job where you could be wrong and still get paid. And I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure Terry Bradshaw and all those guys called the Eagles would win the Super Bowl, and none of them did. But they all have a job. They all have a job.
Welcome to Impact and Fulfillment with Coach Mike D, where you'll gain practical wisdom and dynamic insight from amazing conversations to live your best life. What's going on, y'all? This is Coach Mike D with another episode of Impact and Fulfillment. And if you're watching the version of this, you're going to see all kinds of stuff in the background. You're going to think you're watching the news, okay? If you're listening to it, you're going to really hear an interesting story. And the story revolves around this character of a guy that I met while on set shooting one of these crime drama television shows. He was on set and I was on set. We were both working as actors. And the guy that I have is none other than Captain Accurate. His government name is David Aldrich, right? He's a husband, he's a father, but he's also a meteorologist. And we're going to dive into that because I have some thoughts. Growing up, I thought the people on the news were just newscasters who just happened to look at the screen and were just pointing out what was sent to them. But when I met this guy and he went down the rabbit hole of the weather and the patterns and this and that, it was fascinating to me. So long story short, I want to welcome my friend, David Aldrich, Captain Accurate, to Impact and Fulfillment. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for including me in your podcast.
Awesome, man. Thank you. And before we jump into your story and before we jump into our unique interaction, I like to get shout outs from individuals because who are we without the wind beneath our wings? The people who support us, those that give us our drive. Go ahead and give a few shout outs and then we'll jump into your story, man.
Got to give a shout out to my mother, the most spiritual lady I know. I also want to give a shout out to my church because I have a church in East Tennessee that's second to none. Anytime you have a body of believers that can help uplift you when things go rough, because you'll hit rough patches in your life. There's no question about that. It's just nice to be able to have a support structure. And I also want to thank a lot of my Facebook fans because I've actually grown a little social media locally to a little more over 37,000 people. And I have a weather app with about 22,000 people on it. There may be some crossover, but I love being able to help. Oops, hit the microphone. I like to be able to help people when severe weather strikes. And a lot of us are watching Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime or what have you, and they're not going to get a tornado warning when they're watching a season or two of their favorite show. So that's where I come in. I like to be able to give them the notification and let them know what's happening with weather in East Tennessee.
That is so awesome. So awesome. And it's interesting. Again, like I mentioned to the audience, this guy really is into weather. And it's funny, I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, and there was a meteorologist named George Myers. And as a kid, there was this whole branding around the slogan, George said it would. And so that was always about the weather. And so George said it would. And so that was the thing growing up. But I never thought about meteorology as an actual career path. I never thought of the people who talked about the weather as actually folks who studied the weather. I thought y'all were just newscasters. Instead of doing sports, okay, y'all are over here talking about, the rain that's coming. Talk to us a little bit about what really is entailed in meteorology and what led you down the path of going into meteorology.
I like you, maybe had some interest in weather as a kid. I actually saw a big snowstorm in the 70s because I'm a product of the 70s. In fact, I got interested in weather because we had cancellation of school. If your school started alphabetically up high and then you happen to miss it like a minute into it, you had to wait for the radio DJ to go through the alphabetical list. You're like, I got to wait for it to go back around. My high school started with the letter B. So if I got into the C's, I got, oh no, I got to wait for the whole list to be read again in the next half hour. But I did find weather to be fascinating. It is a level of, some level of it is conjecture. But I always love the fact that there's a lot of myths, like the idea that lightning never strikes twice. Well, it strikes like the Empire State Building like 100 times a year.
Wow.
But people don't like to ignore that fact, or the fact that you got the only job where you could be wrong and still get paid. And I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure Terry Bradshaw and all those guys called the Eagles would win the Super Bowl, and none of them did. But they all have a job. They all have a job. Sports analysts still do. Doctors, lawyers, college professors, we all get it wrong from time to time. Even field goal kickers miss, but they still have a job in most cases, unless it's something they mess up continually. That makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, that's fascinating. And so that's interesting because people think that, you know, you're the only job that you can keep your job and not necessarily be on point or not be accurate. But then it's funny because when you and I met for the first time, and let me sidebar for a second.
Yep.
So in Knoxville, Tennessee, it's a production market for a lot of crime drama television shows. So if you see various shows on TV One or some of the other channels out there, Fatal Attraction, Sins of the City, ATL Homicide, there's one called Storm of Suspicion. And actually, I was acting on Storms of Suspicion, and I was on set with David. And we were sitting there talking, and it was interesting because they actually cast a real life meteorologist for the role of meteorologist. And
Yes,
what was so fascinating to me was this guy went so in depth on explaining all the patterns of the weather and what could impact this and what could impact that, that it blew my mind. And one of the things that we talked about was David has the moniker of Captain Accurate. And he's actually built a brand around this moniker of Captain Accurate. Tell us a little bit about how you got that name and what you're actually doing with it now.
Well, I was given that name. It wasn't something I thought, well, that's a name I'm going to take. That was given to me by the news anchor locally after successfully predicting a snowstorm. A snowstorm that was not predicted well by the National Weather Service, but was predicted well by yours truly. So they ended up making a promo and all the rest. So he said, let's go to Captain Accurate at the Green Wall. There was no rehearsal. My heart sank because I'm a perfectionist, probably in the wrong business to be a perfectionist. But I kept thinking, how on earth am I going to live up to that expectation moving forward, being Captain Accurate? So I finally got smart. I watched enough, I guess, Muppets and Sesame Street as a kid. I thought, I'm going to take the expression from Kermit the Frog. It's not easy being green. It's not easy being accurate. And when I use that line, I say that when I'm right, and I say it when I blow it. Because it was, oh, you blew it. I go, it's not easy being accurate. And they go, well, he's right about that. Or, you know, the fact that it's a win-win for me. So I've been using that. CaptainAccurate.com is my website. It's pretty basic, but I'm on different platforms like Twitter and, of course, Facebook and YouTube and all the rest. And, of course, my app. But you were mentioning about sports. I was mentioning about sports. Think about with March Madness, right? When the next time you feel the urge to complain about the weather community where you live, remember your bracket. If you busted your bracket after the first week, you go, oh, it's all done. The bracket's done. Well, it's not easy to predict the future either. And that's what weather people do. But you might say, well, the 7 seed should have beat the 9 seed, but that didn't happen that way, or something like that. So that's the way it goes. Sometimes I think the best part of the forecast is day 1, 2, and 3. Even though we do 7-day forecasts, some venues do 10-day forecasts, but the accuracy falls off after day 3. People don't like to hear that. They're like, la, 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 la. Of course, the consultants in the local TV business say, well, the viewers want 7 days, so you better give them the 7 days. Okay, but the confidence forecast drops after day 3. And it's also true with snow forecast. Nobody's going to predict a snow forecast with the number of inches with any certainty. It's 14 days out. People post it on the internet. It gets clickbait. People click on it. They go, oh, we're going to get a foot of snow. And then when you get closer, it turns out to be a rain event. So you really can't put a lot of stock, in my view, really beyond day 3, as far as the accuracy. I mean, things can change. It can become partly cloudy, mostly cloudy. All sorts of variables can change in a moment's time. But to your point about the storm of suspicion, I had worked in 4 years in Philadelphia. I've worked 4 years in Rochester, New York. And I've worked a couple of years in Huntington, West Virginia. Most of my time has been in Knoxville. And I've worked most recently in Lexington, Kentucky, where I still do freelance work. But I find it interesting because the forecast obviously can change and there can be obviously a lot of expectation built up around certain events. But weather does affect how we live. And that's just kind of why I think that was one of the reasons that it drew me to the actual field of meteorology.
So drawing you to the field of meteorology, what goes into the training and the preparation of becoming a meteorologist? Did you major in meteorology in college? And
I did.
like, talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I spent a couple of years. I grew up just south of Philadelphia. I
Okay.
grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. So a couple of years at the University of Delaware. Then I transferred to UNC Chapel Hill, and I got a degree, a fancy degree, right? Mass communications, radio, TV, motion pictures, all that kind of stuff. And then I decided to go back a couple of years later to North Carolina State University. And that was kind of like I got catapulted into 4 semesters of calculus, physics, atmospheric physics, thermodynamics, oceanography, astronomy, you name it. And then I wish I'd had a course on folklore, or as I call it, weather lore. It's all weather. You know, the groundhog, how many fogs do you have in August before that predicts how many snow events you're going to have? Or what about the persimmon seeds or the woolly worm? You probably heard about the woolly worm. And all that kind of weather lore. There should have been a class on that. And I didn't have that. I kind of learned that on the job because everybody has their own routine. There's some people kind of like, they put their finger there. Oh, it's going to be this kind of winter, or it's going to be this kind of summer. And I just like, okay, well, you know, I like to embrace local sensitivities, what people like to consult. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So you actually had to go through significant training and science and understanding weather patterns and all of that. And I guess when you were coming out, was this a big industry, meaning a lot of people were going through the degree program to become meteorologists, or was this something that was very, very, very niche, you know, from a training perspective?
I think because I'm older than 50 now, there was a time, I remember, I'm old enough to remember when 1982, Weather Channel came out. And everybody said, no way, if you're not that old enough to remember that, no way could you have 24 hours of weather when the Weather Channel came out. Yet it was one of the most popular stations on cable. So there was a time, I think that was kind of the sea change. Because before, if you go back and look at some old 50s and 60s black and white TV weather people, they used a puppet or, you know, the weather dog, or they spin a wheel. There wasn't a whole lot, or the weather gal, weather guy that just was kind of goofy. Willard Scott was a classic example. He used to be, before he passed away, early on, he was like Bozo the Clown. And then he got on the Today Show, and he basically promoted the jelly, you know what I'm talking about. So there was a sea change, I think, in the early 80s when I was growing up, that people said, you know what, you might as well get a degree. It adds some credibility. And I thought, nah, that's kind of what I want to do. Because I didn't want to have to fake the funk and do a tap dance and say, hey, you're going to be this and yucca. I mean, you might as well do sports and news or whatever. You could do a lot of it. You could do features. But for weather, I knew that people were relying on that information. It was important to people. And so I wanted to go through the coursework accordingly. And I did so at North Carolina State.
So, and it's interesting. So hearing you talk, I could see the value proposition historically for meteorology in things like maybe like with the Air Force, or with, you know, looking at different things to coordinate how we're going to launch a rocket, you know, into space, or all these different conditions. But it seems like, based off of what you were saying, there was a conjecture or a point in which that also started to become valuable to the general public, right?
Yes. Okay, that's a very good way to describe it. And I'm coming at it from a Bachelor of Science background. There are those that do have master's degrees and PhDs that might work for NASA, that might work for the National Weather Service. Basically, a National Weather Service has what's called an MIC, meteorologist in charge. They're kind of like the top dog at each office. And there's a lot of stress and pressure to do and put those jobs out there. But for me, I was more interested in television because I had come at it from maybe a theatrical background. I had done some acting as a kid. And so I thought, you know what, it could be a marriage of the left brain and the right brain. And I saw it as just that thing. Now I'm actually coming to you from my command center. I got my radar over here, and over here I have my Facebook comments. So every morning around 6:40 a.m. to 7 a.m., I'll have a sponsor, but I'll be able. Isn't that funny?
Hopefully
you're okay. Together.
It's all good. We're good, my man.
I'll tell you what, my excitement just comes off. Here it goes. Maybe you can hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Over here, I'm able to get Wanda's or Ed's. So I'm able to look at Facebook in real time, something I couldn't do at a Greenwall. So while I'm giving the cast, I go, I'll take this full screen. I'll come over here and I'll show, okay, this person has a question. Let me answer that somewhat real time. And so this gives me an ability to make it more interactive. One of the things I find when I was early on, I found out pretty quickly some of the funny things that I presented this to the AMS, the American Meteorological Society. Back in 2017, I was in Kansas City, and I gave a paper, a little talk for 15 minutes, what I call basically weather languages. Do you know the book, The Love Languages?
Yes, 5 love languages, yes.
I took that and just changed it around, because I said there are weather languages that people don't know about that are articulated all the time. For example, if I say the 2 words bread and milk to this group, what do you think happens? They go nuts. Hey, you're gonna have to get some bread and milk. That must mean the snowstorm's gonna be really big. So, for them, it's like, I gotta get beer, diapers, cigarettes, baby wipes. I gotta do all these things. They start panicking. So I don't use that language, bread and milk, unless there's probably good reason for it. The other one is the crawl. You know, on TV, you used to see the crawl that come across the bottom of the screen. Severe thunderstorm warning, tornado warning. I once took a phone call back when they still took phone calls in the weather center. I was working in Huntington, West Virginia, and someone called me up and said they were upset. Mike, they were upset. They said, how am I supposed to know what county I live in? And I thought, do you pay property tax? Do you have, they had no idea. And then I kept thinking, boy, these people just don't know what's going on. But then I thought about it a little bit later. Some people are in a hotel. They're just passing through town. And that could be a situation where they don't know. And that's why having a reliable weather app comes very handy. My weather app, the Captain Accurate weather app, is free. You can find it at the App Store, Google Play. It works all around the country because I partnered with, in my estimation, the best radar company in the United States. It's Barron Weather. Barron Weather is based out of Huntsville, Alabama. And Bob Barron used to graduate from the University of Tennessee. So there was a connection. I said, you know what? We need to get Bob's product in here. So that's been really successful as far as getting people the notifications. Nothing's worse than reading about a tornado warning, Mike, 2 days after it happened.
Wow.
And so social media, people are like, well, how was I supposed to see this? That's why you need an app to get the push notifications show up on your phone. And then you can respond and get into your safe space if that's the case that you're dealing with.
That's fascinating. And so you mentioned the Captain Accurate app and captainaccurate.com being your site. And this is, my understanding is this is independent, right? So this is an independent weather resource for individuals, because most people, and I think you and I actually kind of chatted about this before, most people watch the morning news for the weather and the traffic. And that seems to be it. And so you have an independent solution, which is, personally, I don't think I know of any independent weather outfit, that's out there operating like this. How unique are you and how you operating?
There's a growing number of us. I can think of someone I know pretty well, a guy named Nor'easter Nick up in New Jersey. He's really he's a trailblazer. But he was someone that reached out to me and said, you know what, you don't need a TV station to do this. What you need is some determination and some grit, a little bit of faith. I think a lot more faith, and then just be able to know who your audience is. I had developed over 9 years of being in Knoxville, a following. I'm probably if I'm not the second, I'm definitely the third most followed on-air personality in Knoxville. And I'm not even on TV. I haven't been on TV in almost 4 years.
Wow.
Traditional TV. I used to do the Jumbotron at Neyland Stadium. So for sports fans, every Tennessee volunteer football game, that was me. If you were in the stadium for 30 seconds, I would go on before the game and give them a weather forecast. That was a thrill. So I had a lot of visibility in my old capacity, but making lemonade out of lemons and finding a way to invent or reinvent yourself has been a journey, and also somewhat exciting, as much as it is a bit unnerving in the beginning.
So to that point, what has been, because this is impact and fulfillment, what has been the most fulfilling part of you creating this independent operation, Captain Accurate, and really pouring into the lives of people who follow you, especially with regard to the weather? What's been the most fulfilling part of all of this journey for you?
I think the I think it's that's a good question. I think it's the connecting of viewers in a different way than I used to.
Mhm.
We've kind of moved away as a society of appointment television. You know
Yes.
what I mean? Somebody's 30 or older. Hey, I'm going to have a 6 o'clock news. I'm going to have a 10 o'clock news. My kids are teenagers. I got one in college at UT, and she's a freshman.
Mhm.
She would never sit down and watch a 6 o'clock newscast. It's
Mhm.
not in her. It's not how she's hardwired.
Mhm.
Everything's kind of on demand. So when I do a video at 6:40 to 7 a.m., I might have a handful of people, that might actually, as I drop my earpiece, might watch it. They might watch it in real time, but most of my video views come at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning. They come later because people watch it when they want to see it. Does that
On
make
demand.
sense?
Yes, on
On
demand
demand.
viewing. Mhm.
And I'll do a Facebook Live during severe storms. I might, get into the radar and get into the velocity and the storm relative velocity, get into tracking storms. But my viewers have that ability with the app. There's storm tracking capabilities with the app. So, but people love just having the ability to just look on their phone. That's where they are now. It's like it's become an accessory, right? It's like having your third hand. You're like, I can't
Yes.
live without my phone, and that's how
Yeah.
people live. So that's where the best place to be, I think, for weather.
So I guess that brings me to the question of going forward, and what does meteorology look like going forward based off of your understanding of how things are trending? Because what you just mentioned was, we're on demand. We like things a la carte and on demand, right? We're not
Right.
looking for appointment. The only thing that people literally have appointment television for is live sports. That's
Yeah.
the one thing that has really not fallen victim to a la carte, on demand. You have some people who are like huge fans of a particular team. If they're
Yep.
working, they'll save the game, but that's a very small minority of the population. Everybody watches sports live. Everything
Right.
else is on demand and a la carte. That
Yeah.
being said, meteorology, you mentioned that most people want to see it when they want to see it, and they just want to have access via their app. What
Right.
does that mean for personalities like yourself and those that may have interest in meteorology in the future?
I think the adage that was taught to me at a young age still applies, and that is, as a meteorologist, your number one goal is to protect lives and property. If you
Mhm.
boil it down, you can be funny like Willard Scott,
Mhm.
or entertaining like Al Roker. You can be any number of things to different people. But at the end, if you're not protecting lives and property, maybe this isn't the right field for you. I think there's
Mm.
at least inherently in all of us, because I say we, a lot of us in the broadcast industry have gone to dozens of schools. We'll do
Mhm.
school visits, sit down in fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, and we love sharing and imparting some of the knowledge that we have to the younger generation. But I think as those kids grow up, and find interest in weather, there's going to be different platforms. Obviously, YouTube, and of course Twitter, different ways that people get their information. So it's kind of like I look at TV in many ways as having its strong place where it is, but there's a different generation growing up that's getting everything from their phone now. So it's
Yes.
everything's kind of relied by the digital age in getting that information when it's convenient for them. So
Mm.
I don't know if that answers your question, but it certainly, I think there's an element of change that's been it's like a sea change in itself, different from the early 80s. Now we're here in the early 2020s, 2023, and I think people are just adapting as they see fit. If they need the weather information in a hurry, they can go to their app and get their information. But sometimes when nasty storms are coming into town, it helps to go live, like you said, with sports.
Mhm.
Nothing's worse than getting, I've done it where I've had to work at an 11 o'clock newscast, and I wanted to see like my Eagles game. I
Mhm.
would record it, and I was hoping that nobody would tell me what the score was. Do you know what I mean? Have you ever
Mhm.
been in that situation?
Yes,
You're like,
100%.
please, Dad, please don't tell me who won the game. And you're like,
Uh,
go Eagles. I'm like, oh,
uh,
Dad, you just killed it for me. And I
mhm.
figured like, but kudos to Kansas City for winning. But it was a good matchup. It was a great game. But I'm of the mindset that when weather is breaking, there's no substitute for live. But most of the time, it's partly cloudy and 70. It's not going to demand instantaneous attention.
And so I guess my question is the meteorologist as a role and or position. So is the role of meteorology, will that be something that's needed for the interpretation and the context so people can kind of get the understanding? Because you can go to the app or you can get the information of this is the temp, this is the precipitation, this is the chance of rain. But to me, you all help to color the experience for the person. Does that, you kind of get what I'm saying?
Yes. And now often we'll pick up the phone. I'm sure you've done this, Mike, and ask Siri or Alexa, what's the forecast?
Yes.
And maybe he or she, they will tell you what the forecast, but it may not have the same flavor. You probably wouldn't rely on Siri to tell you how much snow you're going to get. And is that tornado that's on the ground, is it going to affect me in the next few minutes? You're probably not going to ask Alexa for that. You're still going to want the human interaction. And I think that's where that really comes into play.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's just so powerful. And I love the fact that, you have a tool, Captain Accurate, that is valid for people no matter where they live across the country, correct?
Correct.
And so anybody can download it, whether they have iOS, Android. Right. It's out
free.
There. Okay.
I got to tell you one of the other weather languages that brought the house down at the AMS in 2017. I guess that's now 6 years ago. COVID has kind of been like the Marvel Universe blip. It kind of blipped through a couple of years. But I had came back from dinner. I was in a TV station. I was the chief meteorologist at a local station. And I came back from dinner, and the assistant news director said, there's a guy on the phone. He's got a weather complaint. And I thought, oh, that's just how I want to come back from dinner. But I picked up the phone, and he says, yeah, I got a weather complaint. I said, what is it? He said, you said we were going to get 2 to 4 inches of snow. I only got 3. I'm thinking, give me some love. High five.
Yeah.
High five. And he's like, I said I only got 3. And I immediately thought of Dumb and Dumber. I immediately thought of the guys riding on a moped with snow in their teeth. And I'm thinking, why is that a complaint? And then I thought about it. There is a population, might be 10%, maybe 20%, who look at numbers like 2 to 4, and all they heard was 4. If you go take a car to a car dealer, I'm going to give you 2,000 to 4,000 for your trade-in. What did you hear, Mike?
I heard you're going to give me $4,000 for my trade-in.
4,000. Yeah, I only got 3,000. I got ripped off. That's how he felt, and he wanted me to hear about it, and he did. And I used that as an example to my weather peers. I said, next time you think the snow is 2 to 4, don't go 3 to 6, because they're going to hear 6, and that's all they heard. You said we were going to get 6. So you can't win always, but you do your best with what you have.
It's interesting. So, and as you were speaking, I was thinking, like, what would probably be the way to communicate that has the least downside effect? And instead of maybe 2 to 4, you would say we probably shouldn't get any more than 4 inches, or we should get I predict at least 2 inches. And not giving any type of range, but just, giving one point that's either above or below, and just saying, hey, you should get more than 2, or you should get less than 4. And so I don't know.
No, you're over the target. I honestly think, and you have to understand, meteorology is an inexact science.
Yes, absolutely. If
we knew precisely you were only going to get 3, we would say 3. But there's a level of uncertainty. There are several things like probability, 40% chance, or how about a 30% chance of rain? Would you take, Mike, an umbrella with you if there's a 30% chance of rain? Most people don't know what to do with 30%. It's like, I'll just leave it in the car. But if I said there was going to be a 30% chance the elevator you ride to work is going to crash, you're going, I'm taking the stairs.
100%.
I'm not even going to go in that elevator. So it's still 30%. It's all about probability, but people don't always interpret it the same way. The weather language theme.
Okay. Now I have a question here. So you said that, and this is something I think I've had a debate with my wife about. I didn't really know how to answer it. So 30% chance of precipitation,
Uh-huh.
does that mean there's a 30% likelihood, or does that mean we expect 30% of the area to be covered?
You know what? This is something that's really kind of unfolded in the last 5 to 10 years. More and more local TV stations will use coverage. So the answer to the question, or answer to your question, is it depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to the National Weather Service, I have it on high authority. They go 30% chance of rain means that every county has a 30% chance of getting wet.
Gotcha.
They're not into this coverage idea. The coverage idea helps if you're on TV because there looks like there's a little bit of green here on the southern valley south of Knoxville, a couple of showers beginning to form, but it's dry as can be from this part, this part, this part. So it's really, again, if you're on television, it helps to say, hey, it may only affect this lower portion or the west side of town, east side of town, because people want the specifics as they can make use of it. If you think it's going to rain all day, that's another thing. When you say, hey, we got an 80% chance of rain, and they go, is it going to rain all day? And I'm like, well, is it? If that's why we'll have like a future cast. We'll show a product that shows the rain most of the day, and maybe maybe the sun breaks out late in the afternoon. People like to know that. So the little specifics that you can utilize, as much information as you can give to the viewer, the better. Is the way.
Okay, gotcha. But it really just depends on who is speaking.
Right.
Because again, because I think there have been times, and now I'm thinking back to it, you hear you hear them use the terminology percentage coverage versus percent chance. And so you have to listen for that so that you're not thinking, oh, only a quarter of the area is going to get covered. No. He's saying a 25% chance that is going to happen everywhere. And so,
correct.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, think of it too. A probability is one of the harder things to communicate or express. Humidity, another one. Many of us in the weather community have embraced the gold standard, which is dew point. We know that dew point, if it's really high, it means a bad hair day. If it's really low, it feels comfortable. But in weather, we have relative humidity, absolute humidity, specific humidity. The only one we use for television is typically relative humidity. So the dew point is a good standard, but expressing, hey, it's going to be really sticky today. That helps people plan their day. They love a low humid kind of day in the 70s. Feels great. And they don't always understand why it feels great, but you have to explain it either graphically or by words.
But you know, it's interesting. So like, because when you're talking about that, it makes me think about people who live like in Las Vegas or live in the desert, or like my wife's family. My wife's side of the family is from Los Angeles, Southern California, which, you know, it doesn't rain a whole lot there. They've gotten some rain recently, but it usually doesn't rain a whole lot as far as number of days throughout the year. And so everybody talks about heat versus dry heat. And you know, because I'm from Augusta, Georgia, where in the summertime, I remember 95 degrees with almost 100% humidity, where if you sweat, it's not evaporating. It's just going to stay on you, right? But 95 degrees in Southern California, it doesn't feel like the same 95 degrees in Augusta, Georgia.
I would agree with you. I have a brother who's in Las Vegas. So his dew points are always in the single digits. And so I'm like, there's no humidity. And I went out when he got married, of all places, in Vegas, years and years ago. It was 116. We had a record high. So I was like, this is hot, but it wasn't that humid. So everything's relative, I think. Absolutely.
Interesting. And so that, I mean, that's fascinating. Like I can appreciate this, and I hope everybody listening can appreciate your level of enthusiasm. And one of the reasons I really was excited to have you on was whenever I connect with someone who is passionate about what they do, it shines through them. And one of the things that, you know, I am called to do is to encourage, empower, and enhance individuals into maximum impact and fulfillment. And the goal is I want everybody walking around and interacting with people with the same level of enthusiasm that you do when we open up the concept of weather, because it shines through. It gives you a sense of joy, but then it also gives you the capacity to bring so much more to the table that otherwise wouldn't have been there because of your enthusiasm, your love for it, and your energy. So for that, and for sharing that, I want to say thank you, David.
Oh, my goodness. My pleasure. My pleasure. One little footnote that my brother taught me from afar. He said, here in Vegas, they get panicked when it rains. Kind of like people back east get worried when it snows. They don't want to drive when it's snowing. He says, you got to remember, Vegas is a desert. They get worried when it's raining. And some of them aren't even really proficient with how to use the wipers. So, yeah, I get it.
And let me tell you what's funny about that, because again, my my wife's parents live in Los Angeles, and so every time that it rains out there, it's like kind of how we treat the snow down here in the South. Like when it's gonna snow, like if they announce, if one of y'all meteorologists announce that it's gonna snow here, if you go to the grocery store that day, there's no milk, there's no eggs, there's no butter, there's no bread. People literally think we're gonna get stuck in the house for a month. Like all the toilet paper's gone. It was ridiculous. But the funny thing is, the way that my in-laws talk about California is very similar. If it's about to rain, they treat it the same way. Like, oh, we're not leaving the house. We can't go anywhere. Let's go to the grocery store now because it's gonna rain. Because everything in their life is kind of built outside because they're so used to moderate weather 365 days a year.
Exactly. We think of a snow day, they go at a rain day. It's a big deal.
Yes, it's humongous.
Right. Now, one thing I had a benefit when I started my TV career, it kind of moved me around. I ended up working in Rochester, New York for 4 years at the #1 station in Rochester. Still have some great friends up there, but they average 100 inches of snow per year. So to kind of bring this back around, when we were on that set for Storm of Suspicion, I was asked, could you talk about snow around Syracuse? I said, that's just like an hour away. Sure. Let's talk about Syracuse. Like, I knew Syracuse got more snow than Rochester typically. Buffalo would typically get maybe 89, 95 inches a year. Rochester about 100, about 135 on average for Syracuse. So I just started using some of that information on the set, and it seemed to make the director happy. I think we only did it took one take.
It was a one-take wonder, man. We only needed one.
That was a lot of fun. It was great meeting you there too.
Man, look, I don't believe anything. I don't believe in luck. I believe everything in life happens for a reason. And I think we were selected to be in that specific moment for that reason. And maybe it was for us to get here to share your story and share the joy that you bring in talking about weather. So either way, I say thank you, my friend.
Oh, my pleasure, Mike.
Awesome. So going forward, so how can people follow you? How can folks download the app? How can folks learn more about, Captain Accurate, Mr. David Aldrich?
Real simple. If you just go to captainaccurate.com, it'll be a link to different platforms like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. I'm also started recently a premium service for my local viewers because they like to hear about snow in March. I started this back in Halloween, so they've had it a couple of months now. But some people want some extra weather information. They're teachers, they're landscapers, they're truck drivers, and they have demands or needs for weather that might exceed the normal casual weather viewer. So I started this thing. It's like $4.99 a month, and it's been very successful. So I've been enjoying able to work with them on a subscription basis on Facebook, but that's not required. That's something that's for those who might want something extra. But the free app can be found at the App Store, Google Play, and I would love to have you. And on Facebook, I am facebook.com/Aldrich Weather.
Aldrich Weather. So I'll have in the show notes captainaccurate.com and Aldrich Weather. Follow Aldrich Weather on Facebook. And if y'all are listening, if you've never met David before, Captain Accurate, you'll be very pleasantly surprised to meet my friend and learn a lot about the weather, engage with him, because again, the energy that he brings is going to spill right back over into you. And so for that, I say thank you, my man.
Oh, my pleasure.
Awesome. Hey, as always, make sure y'all follow Coach Mike D on all social media outlets. Subscribe. If you've not already done so to this podcast, leave a like, leave a comment. And also reach out to David Aldrich. Visit captainaccurate.com, download the app, learn about the weather, ask him some questions. As you can tell, he's very well versed and he loves talking about the weather. Ask him some questions. And but more importantly, just engage. I'm always about engaging with really, really, really dope individuals, because that energy that we have, it spills and goes back and forth. What's the first law of thermodynamics? Energy is neither lost nor gained, or it just transfers basically. I know I'm not saying it correctly.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean. It's not lost.
I know what you mean.
It's just transfers. And so
That's right.
I love that. And so as always, y'all be blessed, well, and wise, and we will talk to you soon. Peace. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and follow Coach Mike D everywhere on social media. Y'all be blessed, well, and wise.